Hello, everybody. We're about 2 minutes out. We'll get started in about 2 minutes, but thank you all that have already started joining. You will be muted during the webinar, but if you have questions as we're going through the presentation, please post them either in the chat or the Q&A section, and we'll address those at the end of the webinar. For those of you in Florida, and I see a few of them, I hope you guys are staying safe, not too terribly impacted by the storm. I guess we're going to have to wait a day or so to see what the impact is, but hopefully not too bad for any of you. Thank you for taking the time to join. Good afternoon, Pete. Good to see you on. Yeah, I hope some of our folks, and I know Louisiana Forestry Association is going on today, but hopefully some of our folks in Louisiana, Texas will start getting some rain soon. Just a reminder, everyone will be muted during the webinar, but if you have questions, please post them in the Q&A section or the chat. We are at the top of the hour. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Advocacy in Action, How FLA's Grassroots Engagement Impacts Policy. I'm Scott Jones, the CEO of Forest Landowners Association, joined today by our Director of Government Affairs, Craig Anderson, and our Director of Stewardship Initiatives and Regulatory Affairs, Katie Moss. We look forward to walking you through how we work our set to go teams, and also on why they're important to our overall policy and advocacy agenda at the association. So to remind you about what our policy priorities are at the association, the main goal that we have and all the work that we do is to sustain private forests. We have to sustain the ones who own them. In order to do that, we have to make sure that you're operating in a regulatory and economic climate that supports your continued growth and success as a private forest landowner. So everything we do is rooted in private property rights. And the three main buckets that everything that our legislative and regulatory initiatives fall into that Craig and Katie work on are really making sure that we have open and robust markets for forest products. That helps you be economically successful with your forest ownership, which allows you to continue managing those forests. Also, that you have regulatory certainty and stability. Understand, we're not saying we do not want to operate in a non-regulatory climate, but we want to be in one that respects private property rights and allows freedom of operation on our properties so that we can be economically successful with those properties. And also fair and certain taxation, which is a key to a lot of what we do. We make long-term investments in our forest, and we have to have some sort of certainty in how we're going to be treated from a tax standpoint when it comes to monetize that stand that we invested in for such a long period of time. So these are the policy priorities that drive all the work we do. The real key is, how do we get that work done? And really, to give you some insight onto the strategy and how you can be a part of this strategy, Craig will tell you about how we get this work done and how you can be involved in that. Craig?
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. And again, thank you for everyone that's been able to join this webinar today. I am Craig Anderson, the Director of Government Affairs. And first wanted to kind of walk you through what is grassroots advocacy, because this is FLA's strategy when it comes to working with our policymakers. And, you know, given the hurricane, it's a very timely opportunity for us to just educate you on how we operate, but also how we get members like you involved with our advocacy program. And quite simply, grassroots advocacy is about speaking up, getting involved, and making sure your concerns and your ideas are heard by elected officials, be it your member of Congress or officials at federal agencies. And it's a means for you to share your public opinion, as well as government action that needs to be taken by utilizing our membership collectively with their stories and experiences. And there's a 4-step approach that I take when it comes to interacting with our policymakers. And that first is being informed. Being informed starts with sharing the information on policy and regulatory updates with our membership, be it set to go, membership wide, or board of directors. The second is connecting with policymakers. And that seems to be a steep hill for some people, but as someone that used to work for Congress, it's an easy avenue for me to navigate. Third step is sharing your story. And that's something that sets FLA apart from a lot of other organizations, is that our members have a very powerful story when it comes to helping shape that public policy. And lastly, offering simple and effective solutions. When you work with policymakers, the last thing they want to hear is yet another problem. You need to come to the table and offer a solution in order to be a good, trusted partner when it comes to working on some common sense policy initiatives. And why is this approach effective for FLA and our members? FLA is uniquely positioned to succeed with grassroots advocacy because our members are located all across the country. So we're a very geographically diverse group of members. And with this large footprint, our team is able to engage with a large number of legislators and policymakers to ensure that the common sense policies that impact you are being proposed and implemented. FLA is committed to engaging with our membership and policymakers across the country, be it in the woods or in the halls of Congress. And finding the opportunities to connect our members with those policymakers to share their stories is a critical part of our success. And I will turn it over to Katie for the next slide.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. And as Craig said, thank you all so much for taking the time today to be on this webinar, and really excited to talk to you all about our grassroots advocacy efforts. So at FLA, our grassroots advocacy sort of platform that we use is our Set to Go program, which stands for State Engagement Teams to Grassroots Optimization. So these teams are made up of stakeholders throughout the forest supply chain. Everyone from landowners to seedling providers, loggers and mill operators, manufacturers, academia, anyone that has a vested interest in forestry, we would like to have on these teams. And these members of these teams are at the ready to engage and advocate on issues of importance to the forestry community. So as part of our engagement teams, those members receive monthly or bi-monthly emails that contain, a more in-depth look than our general membership typically receives on FLA's policy work, as well as opportunities to engage at a deeper level with policymakers to advocate for issues that may impact your forest operations or your economic viability. So our engagement teams stay plugged in on everything from legislative issues, such as the Disaster Reforestation Act and the Farm Bill, which Craig will talk more about, to regulatory issues such as species listings or critical habitat designations. So really a range of issues there. And then we also want to provide several different levels to engage as you see fit. And we provide, a few simple and easy opportunities through these teams. So the easiest and probably the most typical that you'll see as part of these engagement teams is just responding to FLA's calls to action by contacting your senators or your representatives on a specific issue. And similarly, when you receive these calls to action, sending them out to your contacts, be it family or friends or business associates, who may also have a stake in forest policy issues so that they can be tuned in to what's happening and also engage with their members of Congress. Another opportunity that we provide is attending local or virtual events that are organized either by FLA or other entities in order for us to advance our shared policy priorities. So that can be anything from field hearings to outreach events, or as we've seen this year, listening sessions that are hosted by congressional committees. Another really important aspect is the opportunity to tell your story and how these forest policies impact your operations and what you do on the ground. And so this can happen either via outreach to your members of Congress or also op-eds that are prepared by FLA that can be shared in newspapers or other local media. And we want to make those opportunities as easy as possible for you all. Also, just serving as a resource for quotes or other insightful information on the impact of these policies and regulations so the FLA can include it in our own messaging and use it to advocate for these policies on your behalf. And then lastly, we want these teams to be an avenue for you all to provide feedback to us on any additional policy issues of importance to you. We want you to share your priorities and what's going on in your state or your region so that we can figure out how FLA may be able to advocate or provide support on other issues as well. So we have some photos here on this slide that kind of demonstrate the different types of engagement that our teams have done over the years. So on the far left, we have our previous Arkansas engagement team. They hosted a field hearing for their Congressman Tom Cotton to support his first Senate run. So if you couldn't tell who the congressman is in this photo, it's the one who is in the middle of the woods wearing a tie. You'll see that pretty often. This middle photo is one of our engagement team members from Alabama meeting with his member of Congress. And then the photo to the far right is an event that was organized by FLA in Florida to engage with the Fish and Wildlife Service about listed species and the benefits of forestry best management practices. And that event was attended by members of the Florida engagement team as well as other forest stakeholders. So a lot of different unique opportunities for our teams to engage both locally and on the Hill. So, we really want these teams to be seen as an opportunity and not an obligation. So we know that you all are very busy, and we definitely want to be respectful of your time if you're participating in these engagement teams. We also know that not everyone will have the expertise or a personal experience to share regarding every policy issue. So we definitely want you to engage when and how you can. And so these teams, we just want them to serve to give you the tools and the opportunities to do so. So like Craig said, policymakers, they want to hear from you, their constituent, and the people that are impacted by these policy and regulations on the ground. And so these engagement teams just provide a unified voice on these issues and really put a face and a personal story to our advocacy efforts. So just to show you how easy it can be, we do have some examples of the success that we've seen so far this year with our engagement team's grassroots advocacy efforts. So I will turn it back over to Craig to cover some of the exciting things that our teams have been doing in 2023.
Thank you, Katie. And like Katie said, the bulk of the work is truly as easy as sending an email or making a phone call. And again, we understand that you have very busy personal and professional lives, but our policy priority remains the same after several years, and that is the Disaster Reforestation Act, which is a bipartisan and bicameral bill that would correct the current tax inequity that landowners face after a natural disaster strikes their property. And so part of the success with the momentum that we've seen with this bill is because of members like you that have been engaged and willing to participate, be it virtually or otherwise. And so the bulk of the work is keeping people in the loop with these legislative and regulatory updates and movement that we're seeing with policies that could impact you. But there are also other opportunities that involve in-person events, and some of these involve Farm Bill listening sessions. So in the first photo, you can see one of our members participated in an event in Oregon with the House Agriculture Committee. We also participated in 3 other Farm Bill listening sessions. One was in Maine, Minnesota, and also one in Florida. And then we also had took advantage of the opportunity when members of Congress each year they have what's called August recess, when they are out of DC and go to their districts to hear from stakeholders as well as constituents about issues that matter to them. And so in the middle photo, we have Michael meeting with Congresswoman Julia Letlow in Louisiana. And the reason why activities like this are so important is because it builds relationships as well as sustains them. Because there aren't many people that represent rural America. And so, sustaining as well as expanding those champions for us in Congress, but also in federal agencies, is key for us to be able to advance the policies that matter most to you. And so in the final picture, that handsome devil is myself with Congressman Aaron Bean from Florida, who's a freshman member, but one that has a very unique background where he has family that's in the forestry sector. So very exciting to find more people like that that are interested in helping us and want to do more to ensure your success. And so I wanted to take a minute to hear from one of our members that did participate in one of these events. And his name's Peter Connor. He actually participated in the Farm Bill listing session in Minnesota at Farm Fest. And so would like to give him a few seconds to just talk about his experience and what it was like to participate in one of those.
Thank you, Craig. It can be rather intimidating, but I want to tell you from my experience just how easy FLA makes it. I was contacted maybe a week or 2 weeks prior to the listing session that was held by JT Thompson as part of the regional Farm Bill listing sessions that they've been having. So originally sort of FLA reached out to me and said, hey, are you available? I checked my schedule and I was. And from then on, it just got really easy. Craig was terrific and put together all of the talking points for me very concisely. And it was very easy to articulate that message of FLA to the listening group. Now, they also prepped me on sort of, which I thought was important, was what is the crowd going to be like when you get there? So Craig and Scott both sort of explained to me that, look, you're going to be probably, the only or certainly a minority of speakers with regards to forest land issues. And most of the people that will be speaking will be, either from other organizations or they'll be row crop farmers. And that was very good to know going in, just to know exactly sort of what climate you were walking into. The other thing was they even went through, for example, what I should wear. So like, you're going to be with row crop farmers, whether they've got, 100 acres or, 10,000 acres, they tend to be rather casual. So that was great advice. The other part that was great working with Craig was going over those talking points. And then I just happened to be able to work in a short anecdotal story about the impacts of a sort of a dramatic weather event, which had wiped out, a significant acreage of our timber in order to articulate the challenges that we had, although this was a federally designated disaster zone, getting remunerated for the damage that was done, and then also just how disproportionate the compensation was relative to the value that was destroyed. And I can't say enough about how easy the entire process was. All in, with travel and the meeting and everything else, it really represented about half a day for me. And it was really, in light of what was at stake, it was, just a pittance compared to what the potential value is to the overall industry of forest landowners coast to coast.
Thank you so much, Peter. Appreciate that. And like Peter said, we are making this easy for you. We do not expect any of you to be a public policy expert. We don't expect any of you to be a gifted orator. We don't expect any of you to know how to entertain or interact with legislators. That is our role. That's our job. And I guarantee we're going to make all of you look good if you're willing and able to participate in any of the opportunities that we'll present for you. And so, very fortunate that Peter was able to hop on and give a brief recap of his experience, because we're going to have plenty more opportunities to give to members like you that are interested in sharing your story. Because like Peter said, having his personal anecdote, that tie is what legislators and policymakers want to hear. They want to know, how does this policy impact the reality that landowners face, that people in rural America face? And so thanks to people like Peter, we are a step closer to getting the Disaster Reforestation Act across the finish line, and certainly look forward to finding more of you that are willing to help out. And so to talk about ways that more of you might want to get involved, I will kick it back over to Katie.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. So how can you be a part of FLA's grassroots advocacy efforts? The simple answer is to join one of these state engagement teams. So we have engagement teams across the country, as you can see in the map on this slide. The states that are dark green already have established teams, but we are, of course, always happy to add more members to those teams. You can see also that we have some teams that are individual states, like in the Southeast, and then we have other teams that are regional, and that is just based on the number of members in those states or those regions. And just to answer Pete's question that I saw come up in the chat, we have over 160 members of these state engagement teams nationwide. So the states in light green, we are in the process of getting those engagement teams started. And then the states that are white, we don't have teams started yet, but we definitely want to. Any state with forest land where we have members, we would like to get an engagement team started. So if you would like to learn more about our grassroots engagement efforts, you can visit FLA's website at this link below, and it'll take you right to our Set to Go page. And then if you would like to join an engagement team, it's really simple. Just email me, and I will either add you to an existing team, or we will work to get a team started in your state. So it is as simple as that. So with that, are there any questions about grassroots advocacy or our Set to Go program, or joining an engagement team, or anything that you can think of? So seeing none yet, Craig, do you want to, a question that we get a lot is, what do we need to do if we live in one state but own forest land in another state? So Craig, would you like to answer that?
That's a really good question. And, this is a question that one of our members from Texas, Wayne Alexander, has asked. He lives in Texas, and yet he has a lot of land in Louisiana. And likewise, even our magazine editor, Pete Williams, has asked this. he lives in Florida, yet has land in Virginia. And so the easy answer is you should always contact the member of Congress that you vote for, where you're registered to vote. However, you're not limited to that. Members of Congress are looking out for their entire congressional district, and they're looking out for the people and businesses that impact their congressional district. And so truly, for landowners, you have a huge opportunity to have a larger influence than others might by having land outside of where you typically vote. And so this is a great opportunity, again, for having more members of Congress that can be engaged and work with us. Sometimes people feel that they should only contact a member that aligns with their ideological or political beliefs, or that is more of a rural member that understands those issues. However, I would challenge you, if you live in Chicago, LA, Atlanta, New York, contact your member of Congress. These people also need to know about these rural issues, because at the end of the day, everyone here understands that private forest landowners provide the clean air, pure water, and habitat for the entire country. And so it doesn't matter if it's urban, rural, suburban, engagement is important for everybody. Great question.
Great, Katie. I have one question for Peter, if he's still on the call. Did you enjoy the experience? I mean, was it, when you were driving home, was it something where you were like, oh, I'm glad I did that? You know, that was a good experience. I mean, was it enjoyable for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an enlightening experience. I think that first and foremost, what is so revealing is, you know, we are, as forest landowners, part of the Department of Agriculture. Now, the Department of Agriculture, of course, is vast. And with that, there are, you know, it's probably not what people first think of when they think of the Department of Agriculture, you know, primarily because we're timberland owners and our crop cycle is about 140 years, right? So it's a little bit different. But seeing how much power and influence the other elements, you know, within the Department of Agriculture are working and advocating for their own interests, it's very important that we too are doing the same and having that same, you know, outreach, because otherwise we'll just continue to be overshadowed. And I think that was one of the great take homes for me, Scott. It was a great question. You know, it was rather illuminating in terms of, you know, just how much, I mean, of course, the Farm Bill is gigantic and the amount of funds that are there are extraordinary. But perhaps because we aren't as front and center as some of the other groups are, it seemed to me it was very important that we continue this kind of, you know, exactly what you're doing. I mean, it seems critical to me, if that helps to answer that question.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, and we had another question in the chat from Reese. He asked, how often do the state engagement teams convene, and how do I get involved with the Georgia team? Thank you for that question, Reese. That's a really great question. So our state engagement teams receive frequent communications, either monthly or bi-monthly, but we don't have state or regional set to go in-person meetings at this time. But it is definitely an opportunity to grow. It's something that we would be interested, especially if the members of that state engagement team are interested in meeting in person. Now, we do occasionally have events such as our Timber Talks and Forest Forums that take place in you know, individual states that are related to other issues. For example, the Timber Talk that we had in Florida. We have another Timber Talk centered around seedlings that is coming up in South Carolina. And when we do have those events, we make sure to invite the state engagement team, so that anyone that is interested can be at those events as well. And as for joining the Georgia engagement team, I will get you added right after this webinar. Let's see. I see another question. Is there a requirement of the time needed to be a part of the Set to Go team? Simple answer, no. We definitely would like for everyone that's on the team to be engaged, but it's as you have the time and as you would like to engage. We don't have a requirement by any means. We would like to see everybody, at a listening session or sending emails to their members of Congress, but we do understand that, everyone has other time commitments, and we want you to be able to engage as you see fit and as you have the time. Any other questions? I don't see any in the chat or the Q&A. Let's see. Donna said, I would be interested in working closer with other engagement members. I think if we approached politicians as a small group, we would be more impactful. That is absolutely correct. And Craig, maybe you have some insight on how small group meetings can be impactful in situations like this.
Absolutely. That's always an opportunity to schedule meetings like that. But don't sell yourself short, because your individual story is just as important than being in a room full of other landowners, because most elected officials or policymakers, they're there to learn about what the problem is and what the solution is to that problem. And so you can be effective on your own. However, I know that me, Katie, and Scott are all more than welcome to join people in those meetings. I'm never going to throw someone in the deep end and feel like they are going to be fielding hypothetical questions or strategy related questions. And that's something I'm always happy to kind of work with. But group events are also great too. We love to have a variety of ways that we engage with our elected officials. So that's a great point, Donna. Thank you.
All right. It looks like there are not any other questions in the chat or the Q&A at this time. But definitely, please, if you think of a question later, feel free to reach out to myself or to Craig. Our emails are right here, so feel free to just shoot us an email with any other questions that you may have. So again, thank you all so much for taking the time today to join us for this webinar. Really appreciate your participation. And, it was such a great opportunity to talk to you all about how we can achieve success through our grassroots engagement. And we really hope that you all, if you aren't on an engagement team already, will want to join an engagement team or get a new one started in your state. So thank you all again so much, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.